Hello. On behalf of the College of Continuing and Professional Studies and the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at the University of Minnesota, welcome to our 2025 OLLI Sampler event. My name is Kate Schaefers, and I'm director of the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, also known as OLLI, here at the University of Minnesota. I'll be your host today. I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus is built on the traditional homelands of the Dakota people. It's important to acknowledge the peoples in whose lands we live, learn, and work as we seek to improve and strengthen relations with our tribal nations. So before we start, let me share just a really brief amount of information about OLLI. We are a place to learn, grow, and connect for lifelong learners ages 50 plus. I'll have one of our volunteers talk a little bit about OLLI, but I also do want to say if you're a current OLLI member, welcome. We're thrilled to have you here today. And if you're new to OLLI or just curious about OLLI, welcome. We look forward to getting to know you. This morning's event runs for about an hour and a half, and our program features three of OLLI's dynamic instructors. Before our official program, we'll briefly hear from two current OLLI members and volunteers, so let's get started. It is my pleasure to introduce OLLI's past advisory board chair, Nancy Allen. Nancy has been active in OLLI since 2014 as a member as well as a frequent volunteer. Welcome, Nancy.
Welcome, everybody. It is wonderful to see not see, but to see that so many of you have joined us. And for the new timers, this is for your first time, this is going to be a wonderful hour and a half. You're going to hear from some terrific, terrific teachers, lectures. But as Kate said, I have been on the board I've been the chair for the last 5 years, and it has been such a joy and a pleasure for me to be part of this amazing, wonderful organization. Just a little bit of information about OLLI. We are one of 126 nationwide. We are all over the United States, and I just think our university, OLLI, is one of the best. So as the slides say, OLLI is housed on the University of Minnesota campus. And it is a place, as Kate was saying, where we grow and find community. So currently we are over 1,100 members here, and we have over 150 course leaders. Our board is strictly a volunteer advisory board. And again, it has been my pleasure to be on the board now for over 6 years. And as you can see from your upcoming catalog that you will get, we have hundreds of courses offered. They are non-credit. The best part of the courses is that you sit back and just enjoy. No tests, no papers to do. Some of the courses that we offer, as you can see, are all over the spectrum. We have culture, government, geography, art, literature, science. We have a little bit of everything for you. So I think the hardest thing that you're going to find is deciding how many classes you're going to take every semester. Plus, we have guided tours. So some of the samples coming up for 2025 are art theft in the FBI, which was offered last time, which was just wonderful. As you can see, we have something new, thinking of a hacker in the age of AI. We all are going to need that. The Beach Boys, how much fun is that? And German Minnesota, and the Cuban Missile Crisis. So these are just some of the samples that you will see coming up in your fall 2025 catalog. We are on campus. We're in the metro community. I think we have just added a couple of more places, and they will be listed in your fall catalog. And of course, we still have Zoom. In the fall, quite frankly, I'm not sure exactly what the numbers are, but we will have a lot of classes, both in person and on Zoom. So can't say that you can't get to class. And of course, we were talking about how our community is a very active and engaged community. We seek for volunteers. We are active as members of OLLI, trying to get together with each other. So we always say, come for the, come for the education and come for the learning, but also come for the community, because that's very, very important to us. We also have what we call SIGs, which is a special interest group, and they meet apart, not necessarily in a formal classroom situation, but it's a group of people who want to just get together on a weekly basis, or maybe once every 2 weeks, whatever. And we have everything from birding to mysteries to fiction to writing to bikers. Depending on the season, we have hikers. So you have to really look at the special interest groups, because they are a wonderful example of how you can get together as a community with people who have an interest in like-minded hobbies or interests. So we have a lot of volunteer opportunities. And as I was saying this morning before we got on, today they're doing a big NPR discussion on volunteering in Minnesota. And Minnesota is a very, very highly volunteer state. So we ask if you are interested in volunteering with OLLI. You can become a course leader. You can become a course assistant, which I have been for many years. You can manage a SIG. You can serve on the advisory board. You can help host an event. And so volunteering, and believe you me, we will have opportunities for you to volunteer if you wish. So that's a very important aspect of our OLLI community. So the member benefits are the annual fee, and you have over 250 courses per year. Again, I remind you, you don't have to take exams, no papers, no tests. This is just sit back and enjoy and participate. We have special interest groups, we have book clubs, we have events throughout the whole year. So we have a lot of good volunteer opportunities. And for those of you who have never been an OLLI member and you want to try us out, this fall we have a membership for you for only $79. So come and try us out. You can take as many classes as you wish for the semester, for the fall semester, for only $79. It's a deal. So I hope to see you there. So I hope to see you either in class. I hope to meet you. I know a lot of you, but for the new members, I welcome you, and I look forward to seeing you either in class or on Zoom. So thank you so much for your time, and I'm going to pass it on to Kate.
Thanks so much, Nancy. And I do want to also mention, Nancy mentioned the course guide, and it is available on our website at this point, PDF version at olli.umn.edu. So we'll also send you a link after this webinar so you can look at it there. So now I'd like to introduce Joe Coulthard. Joe first joined OLLI, I believe, Joe, in the fall of 2021, and he's been an active learner and volunteer. He teaches many courses, most notably around rock and roll, including this fall, the Beach Boys class. So we're really excited about that. And Joe's going to tell us a little bit about what his experience is like as a member of OLLI. Joe?
Thank you, Kate. So I retired from a career in computer programming 4 years ago, and shortly thereafter, I saw an ad for the OLLI sampler, just like you're watching right now. And so that was my introduction to OLLI. So I've always been a learner. I've always been curious, and it looked great. So I signed up and very much enjoyed it. So that was the fall 4 years ago. So since then, I've taken a breadth of courses through OLLI on movies, on food, on finance, on music, on art, on science, history, literature. And it's always exciting when the new catalog comes out. I was looking at it last night, and it's like Christmas. There's so many directions you can go. And one of the things I really enjoy about OLLI is we have a very vibrant OLLI community here. And so there's a lot of opportunities. And so you can really kind of craft your own experience within OLLI. If you want to take an online class only, or if you only want to do online, you can do that. There's a lot of offerings. If you want to do in person or any mix thereof, you get to kind of choose. I'm the people who teach the classes is also an interesting variety. You have OLLI scholars who are graduate students who kind of teach for a stipend. You tend to get a lot of retired professors or people in industry who continue to teach about their fields, who are, decades of experience. And you also get some hobbyists. So, like me, I have no, I have no musical credentials, except a great interest about it. You can sign up for 2 courses, 6 courses, whatever you want. You only want to do Tuesdays, you can do that. So there's a lot of ways to craft it. The other thing is, if you want to do heavy stuff, like meet with people and talk about current wars or past genocides, and some of those heavy topics, you can do that. Or if you want to watch movies with people and talk about rock and roll music with me, you can do that too. So that's a little lighter on the brain. When I retired, I was pretty deliberate about it. I wanted to make sure, it's my third act, I wanted to get it right. And so a couple of the things that you see out there is you need to continue to develop, right? You need to kind of stretch yourself and do different things. And so OLLI scratches that itch for me, as well as a social interaction. You need to have a network, and I've made great friends through OLLI, and a lot of relationships that I hold very dear. So it's been very rewarding in both those capacities. I first got started as a student, and I think it was probably the next time classes came around, I was a course assistant, which is a pretty low level of volunteerism. You're checking people off as they come in, so that's not too heavy. But I was talked into trying teaching, and I have found it extremely rewarding. One of my first classes was on Taylor Swift. That was online, and that was kind of a big hit. And then I did a session on history of rock and roll in the 1950s. And this fall, I'm doing a three session course on the Beach Boys. So I'd love to see you there. That'd be great. I also lead a travel SIG. Nancy talked about the special interest groups. So our travel SIG talks about, our experiences, tips and tricks, and kind of the hive mind works on solving issues anybody's encountering. So it's fun to get together. We get together about once a month. So all in all, what OLLI did was allowed me to find my tribe. It's my intellectual tribe. These are people who are curious and love to learn. And so I've been a big fan and would be glad to see, more people joining. So join OLLI, you'll make new friends, you'll become smarter, and who knows, maybe it'll even make you more good looking. So thanks for joining us today, and I hope to see you.
Thank you so much, Joe. Today's program will feature 3 of our course leaders. And as Joe mentioned, we have volunteer course leaders. We also have some graduate students who lead classes for us. They're each going to offer a brief lecture based on some of the courses that they're teaching or have taught for us. And I'm going to introduce all 3 first, and then we'll turn it over for the short lectures. So the first person I want to introduce is Kara Barker, and Kara is one of our OLLI scholars. She's a graduate student. She's a PhD candidate in history. And what we find with this OLLI Scholars Program is that it's an opportunity to bring early career professionals into our classrooms, and they bring cutting edge research and scholarship, and our OLLI members just love it. Kara specializes in British history, and this fall she's going to teach a class called Revolutionary Currents, the Atlantic Revolutions in Global Context. Now, some of our OLLI course leaders offer practical insights into how we live our lives today. And our second lecture, featuring Tom Rinkoski, is one of those examples. Tom's taught several courses for OLLI on themes from being a wise elder to brain health and aging. And the topic of today's lecture, which he's going to talk about, Gerotranscendence. And over the course of his career, Tom's been an educator, a professional storyteller, a caregiver, a writer, and an actor. So again, you look at the types of people we have teaching for us, very interesting community. And our third lecture will be presented by Dr. Jenzy Silverman. And Jenzy is an educator and researcher who specializes in music, the brain, and wellness. And she's on the graduate faculty at the University of Minnesota's Bakken Center on Spirituality and Healing. So again, a range of courses. So we're going to start with Kara. So Kara, let me go ahead and turn this over to you.
Thank you so much, Kate. Joe, I had not heard that about the Taylor Swift class, and I will be there. Offer it again. I'm in. But I did actually want to echo something that you mentioned, Joe. I ran a bookstore tour over the summer. We went to 4 different niche themed bookstores around the Twin Cities, and it was fantastic because I think there was such a range of conversation. So there was always someone in there looking at nonfiction books, talking about some of the greatest conflicts in our world today, and then people chatting about romance and buying books for their grandchildren and children, and that was just a delightful range to see. But thank you so much for the introduction. As I mentioned, I am Kara. I am a graduate student here, and I wanted to say that as much as Kate mentioned that we, as OLLI scholars, bring to OLLI, OLLI very much brings the same back to us. This has been an absolute pleasure for the last year to work with this program and to have a space to stretch as an educator. And so I'm going to share a little bit of that with you today. I am teaching a course that'll sort of expand on this concept in the fall, and I would love to see some of you all there. But as an introduction today, we're going to talk a little bit about the American Revolution, and for sake of time, I will dive right in. As Kate mentioned, I'm a British historian, and so we're going to talk today about one of Britain's greatest losses. This is a real fun topic to cover from that perspective. We're going to be talking more from the American perspective today, and this concept of the Atlantic world. So, the American Revolution, what are we going to talk about? So these are some of the questions that I want to answer today. We're going to dive right in, as I mentioned. This was ultimately a local rebellion, the American Revolution itself, but the global echoes of this conflict, I think we're still seeing and experiencing today. So some questions I want to address. What caused the American Revolution? There are both practical, political, and ideological backgrounds. Again, both of which have very long-standing repercussions. We have this sort of emergence. What made the revolution Atlantic is a great question. So we have this emergence in historical studies of the concept of Atlantic studies, this idea that in this era, the 18th century, we're really moving towards an era in history where separation of nations, of concepts, really reduces the picture of what is happening. You have a much poorer understanding if you silo off nation by nation. And you can see that in the way that we're talking about history in the world today, the way we're talking about globalization. This has arguably always been true. I spent all of last year teaching a class on the very beginning of history, teaching sort of World One up to 1500, which, talk about the entire world for 4 months, wild. But that interconnection has always been there. And yet there comes a period in which it can no longer be ignored. And the important question, the question that I think has to carry on from this is what comes next? What follows upon this globally echoing moment of major shift in our nation? There's a lot here about rights and individuality. There's connections to other revolutions. And that's what we're sort of setting the groundwork for here. So give me just a moment here to fix my screen. There we go. Like I said, multiple sort of spheres of origins. We're going to start with the political,
Tara,
or maybe the practical.
we are not seeing your slides now.
Oh, okay. Odd. Thank you so much for letting me know. And I will fix that. Are you back?
There we go.
Yes, participants can see your application. Excellent. Thank you so much for that. So the thing to know about the American Revolution is it started, or rather, it was the end of a pretty long embroiling point of discontent. Many of you know this, but we're going to go through some of that background. This did not begin as a revolution. This began as a protest. Coming out of the 7 Years' War in Britain, which if you don't have a lot of context to that, you don't need it. Just know that Britain was very broke at this point. Ending in 1763, this was an ongoing long-term conflict, primarily between Britain and France, but it really became a pan-European war that was addressing issues of global colonial boundaries. It was a multifaceted, multinational major conflict that Britain won. Great. At this point, coming out of the 7 Years' War in 1763, Britain had gained control formally of all territory east of the Mississippi River in the US. They'd been able to reestablish boundaries in Ohio and Canada. We gained Quebec, fancy. But coming out of this, Britain won at extreme cost. The war debt was deep. They had to conscript merchant ships into the Navy to maintain their naval power. So there was less trade, there was less ability. And so Britain is trying to find solutions to this problem. And the first thing that they think is, well, we've got all of these colonies. What do we have them for if not to make money off of them? So this begins the era of discontent in the US as taxation and surveillance increases. That is where primarily all of these acts come from. And some of these you may have heard of. The Stamp Act begins this process. It's a tax on all printed material. And it actually begins the taxation without representation debate. I think we most iconically think of the Tea Act for that. But this began very quickly after the 7 Years' War, as Britain is trying to institute taxes and find a way to recoup its losses. And at this point, the US still does not have that representation in the British government. They've been promised quite a bit of independent self-rule, and this is the first cracks in that image. So the Stamp Act, it was called, if you notice here on this sign, The Folly of England, the Ruin of America. So pretty omniscient in that way. But it's followed by several other pieces of legislation. The Townshend Acts are quite popular. It's not one piece of legislation, it is actually a collection, primarily meant to raise revenue. The most famous of these is the Revenue Act, which becomes a taxation on all goods upon purchase. But there are also several pieces of legislation that serve as enforcement of this. So the Commissioners Act, Customs Act, the Indemnity Act, the Vice Admiralty Court Act, all of these are different pieces of legislation targeting smuggling, targeting sales and merchants to try and ensure that Britain is able to properly get their taxes from the American populace. Included in this is, because it goes beyond the financial, excuse me, is the New York Restraining Act, which prevents the New York Assembly from instituting any new bills before they accept the Quartering Act. The New York Assembly has refused to accept the Quartering Act of 1765. This is where they're forced to house troops because it didn't seem necessary anymore. And so there's this back and forth politically between the British imperial forces, the British state, and the attempted sort of growing American state to figure out who has what power where. And the American claim is pretty simple, right? This concept of no taxation without representation has maintained such a strong hold in our language because it's a very simple request. But underneath all of that, as those needs aren't met, as those demands really aren't met, this deeply challenges the American loyalty to the British system. It becomes clearer and clearer that there is no support. And this, of course, leads to conflict around the infamous Tea Act. So the irony, and I did want to talk about this real quick, of the Tea Act of 1773 is it actually lowered the cost of tea for most Americans, but it enforced the townshend duties. So essentially, the East India Company was struggling. Again, part of this bigger conflict. And they had a massive amount of extra tea. And so Britain, with the Tea Act, allowed the East India Company to have a monopoly, and the townshend duties therefore applied. So even though it brought the costs down, Americans still saw this as that overreach. And it's where we start to see the shift from the economic and the practical to the political, because this is no longer just about the cost of tea. It's about fears of tyranny. It's about this long simmering lack of proper negotiation between these two powers as America is really seeing itself as an independent nation. Part of that, of course, comes from the ideological origins. This is following on the global emergence of an enlightenment, which is following on the global emergence of a scientific revolution. This is sort of the focus of my own research. I love the Enlightenment. It's a really fascinating concept. And as I was trying to explain in my exam defense what I really thought the core of this era entailed, I said that the Enlightenment is a project of autonomy. And so, in and around all of this is this idea of independence and autonomy moving ideology forward away from the sort of national or monarchical focus towards the individual. So, we see this in philosophies like John Locke. And if you look at these, every one of these becomes a major underpinning of what moves the American Revolution forward. John Locke with natural rights and the consent of the governed, Montesquieu with this concept of the separation of powers, putting the entirety of a power system under one monarch doesn't make sense. And then, of course, Thomas Paine, revolution as common sense. We have his common sense pamphlet. There's also this incredible The American Crisis series where he's speaking much more directly to the American Revolution itself. But I liked this summation. It's not just the concept of common sense governance, but that the revolution is the common sense end to the relationship that had developed between Britain and the US, and that it was essential. And when we talk about the Atlantic, we'll get a little bit more to that in a minute, but all of the revolutions that follow pull on the same ideology. So not only is Britain in a poor place in its relationship with its lovely colony, the US, but the US is also going through this major ideological shift where it is starting to question and consider what it wants to look like as a nation. So, like I said, this revolution began as a protest. And the reason I bring that up is because I think it's important for the context of every revolution that follows. What we see is the building of a nation. What we see now and today is the Articles of Confederation and the Declaration of Independence. But even these early conflicts, the Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party, if you look at our dates from the previous slide, they come after almost a decade of previous conflict, right? So we're dealing, by the time we get to the Declaration of Independence, we're looking at a decade plus of interwoven political, ideological, personal conflicts with this parent nation that Britain is. So the project of a full revolution came later. The First Continental Congress in 1774 isn't to establish a revolution, it's asking a question. How do we deal with this? What should come next? The Declaration itself comes out of the Second Continental Congress, and it is at core a rejection of monarchy. This, of course, is following the shot heard round the world. What I find so interesting about this, so the shot heard round the world is the first shot fired of the American Revolution, at least we call it that. It's the Battle of Lexington, the ignition of true conflict. The British troops are marching to Concord through Lexington to seize military supplies, and they clash with local militias. And so this phrase, the shot heard round the world, was coined by Ralph Waldo Emerson in 1837, which I find so interesting because it takes so little time to understand the impact of this moment. And he says, by the rude bridge that arched the flood, their flag to April's breeze unfurled, here once the embattled farmers stood and fired the shot heard round the world. And that birthed it. The key piece here is over these conversations, over these moments of conflict, the understanding of what the American project should be shifts. We have this move towards suddenly there is a new vision. The people are the sovereign, and that is what we're moving towards. Now, how does this become global? We know when we talk about this as such a critical moment in the American history, but ultimately, this is not just about the US. And the American Revolutionary Forces are very aware of that. They are on display. This is, in fact, a performance for a global audience. Some of that becomes obvious when we think about figures like Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. Franklin, who spent the entire war as an emissary in France, as the US's first foreign diplomat, and who is so critical in gaining French support. But it is also part of this broader fight for liberty. As I mentioned, several revolutions follow in the Atlantic world after this one. The French, the Haitian, several different pushes in Latin America against Spanish control, and all of them pull on this same philosophical movement. It is that fight for liberty. It is that concept of people as sovereign. And in the Declaration of Independence itself, they speak to, we are trying to address the opinions of mankind with this concept. So there is a deep understanding that it is a global audience that they are fighting in front of. And again, not for the first time, but probably for a really pivotal moment, we are seeing that the watching of this conflict is almost as important as the conflict itself, at least in the global history of it. And there is a transatlantic dialogue happening. So this cartoon, for example, comes from British papers, but it is mocking that Franco-American alliance. The snake himself says, hey, Monsieur, be pleased to accept the frogs. I have just killed them in the bogs. And this unnamed Monsieur replies, I give you thanks, my good ally. Some will make soup, the rest a fry. And the British response, of course, is, O Britons, be wise and part these allies, or drive them both into the bogs. I think it is fit they should submit to old England and live upon frogs. And so there's a very clear understanding here, both in the part of the British, the part of the Americans, the part of the French, that the world is watching. They have to publish this discourse. This is one piece of many. I have a friend who actually wrote her entire dissertation on the emergence of plays in France and the US that portray and respond to both the American and the French Revolution. There's an understanding that there's a global conversation happening here. And the long-term impact of that, people watching this aren't just the French and the Americans. Simon Bolivar, Toussaint Louverture, they all speak to this conflict when they engage in their own. Part of what makes this so critical is it is both a challenge and a spark. Yes, this is a moment of challenging the divine right of kings that is very critical. This is also the first successful colonial revolt in the British Empire. There have been several up to this point that have had varying levels of impact, but never before has a pushback against the British imperial structure resulted in an independent nation. That will become a norm after quite a long time. There's a whole other era of British Empire that follows, but this is such a critical moment because it is saying, hello, now is the time. This is also talking about a shift in so many different societal norms. It is the undermining of monarchy, of empire, of absolutism. This is a part of a wider shift towards religious tolerance. The Reformation of the previous 2 centuries plays a key role in this being successful. And like I mentioned, there are several revolutions that follow, all in and around the Atlantic world, which is so interesting. And part of the reason that I want to approach that Atlantic lens, because each of them takes up this same challenge and is pushing back on a different iteration of these norms. It is political, it is also ideological, and it is pushing that concept of deep independence. So we have sort of the dates here for various Atlantic revolutions. As you can see, the French is the next, but God bless, they really don't establish their own full independence until 1848. That back and forth is a whole hoot, and I hope to teach it one day. So what is the point here? What is the thing to consider and to take away? I'm really looking forward to teaching this class on Atlantic revolutions, this sort of section on the American in particular, because the Hamilton quotes will be endless. And I really love this one from one of the last songs that is Hamilton himself stating, America, you great unfinished symphony. Because the legacy of this conflict is both inspired and incomplete. It leaves a lot of questions open. It speaks to the idea that a colony could be a functional independent nation. It asks that question, and over time it will be answered. It questions the idea of Britain's place in the world order and what place might a British colony made nation also take up in that space. But there are several questions that remain unanswered for quite a while. The concept of native land dispossession, we're obviously still engaging with. The question of slavery remains sort of an open black mark on the American Revolution as they discuss and acknowledge this problem and its contradictions to the rest of their project, but leave it unanswered. And it's a question that the Haitian Revolution will pick up quite explicitly. And so even the questions that are asked here continue to be answered as we move forward. And that is one of the reasons for this concept of the Atlantic lens. Because one of the questions as a historian that this conflict really asks is, why do all of these same conflicts that follow take up such a similar echo, engage in such a similar space? What is the point of this wider lens? How are these things so interconnected? So those are the questions that I think are worth answering over time, because there are so many echoes. These concepts of the problems of enlightenment itself are tied up in this revolution. So it opens a lot of doors, but it also leaves a lot of questions unanswered. And it is a game-changing moment, obviously. We sit here in this nation because of this conflict, and yet the symphony still feels unfinished at times. So, if today sparked your interest, I invite you to join us in the coming weeks. I would love to see you in a course. I would love to see you in an OLLI course writ large. And thank you so much for the space to present today. It's a real pleasure to be here with you all.
Kara, that was fabulous, and your enthusiasm comes through loud and clear. And I think it was really helpful to hear some of the context you provided. So thank you so much. So
Thank
now
you.
I'd like to welcome Tom, who's going to talk about becoming a wise elder. Tom?
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here. It occurs to me as I listen to the title once again that the concept of wise elder sounds a little bit too much like a prize that you're getting at the end of your life, or maybe a gold medal that you've tried to reach for at a certain time. And I don't want to give that impression at all. What I want to talk about is a way of stepping towards what we used to call wisdom. And what I found as I did my investigation, another term for that I think is really important. A lot of what I've discovered is in this book, that it started, at least the journey of towards what we call Gerotranscendence started in this book. It's called The Life Cycle Completed. It was written by Eric Erikson and his wife, Joan Erikson. And at the end of setting his 8 steps of the evolution of human beings, Joan adds a whole nother chapter and hints at there's something more. And she suggests that that something more might be gerotranscendence. And that's the topic of my presentation, is what is it that we're getting older for and toward, and what are the possibilities? Gerotranscendence is suggested as a shift in perspective as we age. We talk about aging well, we talk about successful aging, but this concept is coming to be something that's more particular, a shift from a materialistic and a rational point of view to what the author Lars Tornstam, a Swedish gerontologist, calls a more cosmic and transcendent point of view. And he says the measurement for which we achieve as we get into our 70s and past is something substantially different than just wisdom. Wisdom is important, he's not negating that, but that there's something decidedly different that certain people achieve, no matter what their health conditions, no matter what their economic conditions, that they can achieve that and work toward that. So the presentation on gerotranscendence is rooted in the science of gerontology, which is not the same as geriatric medicine. Some of us, if we're lucky, we're seeing a geriatric specialist. Gerontology is a little bit different. It's more towards the emphasis of sociology. Stepping back just a little bit from the science thing before I get into that sort of, and that's really part of the second and the third weeks of the presentation, is a lot of us deal with all kinds of vocabulary that attempts to define us, to frame us, to put us in certain packages. These are just some of that vocabulary. All of us are familiar with graying, with senior citizens. You are of a vintage age. You are living in the second half of your life. Those come out of various contexts. This is about how you feel. Gerotranscendence is about where you're at, not how somebody defines us. But it's important to think and to be aware of how our culture is trying to define us. There has been a history of aging activism, of people trying to define what it means to be elder in the United States. Oh, since the 1930s, even into the 1920s, I thinking about the Townsend movement, the Social Security Act said a lot about who we are and what we earn. There was the National Council on Seniors. Then there was the Older Americans Act that sort of legislated who elders were. But then there came, in reaction to that, the Gray Panthers, and in reaction to that, AARP. Then there was this marvelous thing in 1963 called the White House Council on Aging, which continued every 10 years. And they were trying to define and to help people to grasp what aging and what we now call successful aging. There is a National Institute on Aging currently. Anyway, there's a history in the United States of people trying to come to an understanding of what aging is. If you look at movies, and I'm old enough to remember the 1971 Harold and Maude movie, where Maude sort of is portrayed as this wild hippie elder, you know. So movies have portrayed being older in many different ways. Again, I'm trying to transcend that a bit, but it's good to get a framework for it. There was George Burns, who often was, when we think of him in the movie Oh God, and an elder smoking a cigar. On Golden Pond was another critical thing. Cocoon was a whole story about what it meant to age and what that meant. Grumpy Old Men was famously Minnesotan in its thing. And then in 2025, it all sort of changes just a little bit. The image of aging changes with the nonas. Think about television. A lot of us took a sizable definition of being an elder through the Golden Girls being a key element. The Golden Girls led to All in the Family. That led to Sanford and Sons, and those things moved through and helped to the culture to sort of think about what does it mean to be elder. This hopefully gerotranscendence, I'm saying, transcends those social images, but those social images are where we unfortunately get a lot of our definition. What I want to step back to is many people think about life in stages. And that process of moving through those stages is an important part of how we think. As an educator, my whole life, I started teaching in second grade, and I got to see how people develop between second grade and my fifth graders. The process is never quite finished. That's why I introduced, when I started this introduction, I said, well, wisdom is just not an award you get that marks the end. It still is part of the process. It's still part of the how we move through things. Any goal that we have is kind of a goal that a crisis, as Erickson said, that we move through to get to the next stage. Why can't there be another stage beyond? I love this poem by A. Milne. And again, remember, this is from 1924. He says, when I was one, I had just begun. When I was two, I was nearly new. When I was three, I was hardly me. When I was four, I was not much more. When I was five, I'm just alive. But now I am six. I'm as clever, so I think I'll be six forever and ever. That was kind of an introduction to that idea of stages. The most famous person who talked about the stages of being elderly was Carl Jung, of course, in 1930, shortly after that poem I just quoted. But he only said there was two major stages. And if you note the one where the second, there's youth, and the second one, the goal for the mature individual is to consolidate an integrated personality by integrating the consciousness and unconscious parts of yourself. That integration was a key element to what Carl Jung saw as our work as elders. And a lot of us, we're working on that. We're still working on that. I'm still working on that. So Carl Jung saw old age as getting acquainted with ourselves and dealing with that thing that was he called collective unconsciousness. But the person who I think most defined stages of life is Erik Erikson. And that was that book that he put together in the 1990s towards the end of his life after he had done the White House Conference on Family and Children. And he had, of course, stage one, and I won't go into a lot of detail of it, infancy from birth, stage two, autonomy versus shame, stage three, initiative versus guilt. And he continued stage four, and he gave probable ages for all of this industry versus inferiority. I see that in my grandkids. Identity versus confusion was stage five. Stage six was intimacy versus isolation. Stage seven was generativity versus stagnation. But the stage that he suggested for us as elders was integrity versus despair. And this last stage that he posited is often referred to as wisdom. In fact, in his original writing, you would see integrity slash wisdom. And so that term wisdom came out of this definition or this stage theory that Erikson suggested, which sort of became psychological, foundational for a lot of us. We use the term ego integrity in at times. In what I wanted to say that in this book, what I found that was marvelous to me, and I don't get me wrong, I loved Erickson's theory, but his wife, Joan Erickson, upon reading the notes that Eric wrote as he edited, he was known for going back over everything he wrote and circling things in red and writing additional notes. And she noted that he was saying that this final stage can't be final. It's also something that people move through towards something else. And at the time, Joan was reading something by another theorist called Lars Tornstam. And he was suggesting there's a stage beyond this stage of Erikson called Gerotranscendence. And that is where I am looking to unpack and sort of investigate in this 3-week course about what is gerotranscendence. So we'll talk about this kind of stage theory, but then we'll move towards how does Lars in his investigation and in his interviews, why does he think this is so important? What does he see in all the people that he interviews throughout the whole world? You know, what does he see that suggests this other stage that is elders becoming wise, but elders becoming something even more than just wise? Now, there's a lot of people since Lars and since Erickson have come up with other terms. Most famously, Jane Fonda in a TED presentation coined the term third act. And I love that term, third act, Joan said, was a time when we finish up the act of finishing ourselves. This presentation, that's only one of those 17-minute presentations on TED, you could still go back and listen to the whole thing. She does a marvelous presentation talking about aging as a staircase, where we're always moving up towards something. Kind of like Ingrid Bergman said in that very first slide, you're always on progress. She cited Picasso, who said it takes a long time to become young. And Jung being held up as one of that final stage that Gerotranscendence sort of hints at very well. Jane says the third act is more than having experiences. It's reflecting on our past experiences, accepting and living in where we're at right now. I love her analogies and how she uses these analogies. She's such a great live presenter and puts that out. And when she put out that idea of third act, it was taken up by Bill McKibben, who is another one of my personal heroes. And Bill started a movement called the Third Act, which is basically an activist movement that continues in that tradition that I was talking about before, of baby boomers who are in their 70s and beyond, who are trying to think about, how do I take what I've learned and what I appreciate and what I understand and what I believe in and bring it out to the world? How do I share in a co-generational pattern the things that make a difference to many other people? And it's a time, as he says in this passage, to seek meaning and to arrive at the best in our life, because I finally realized that it's not just my life personally, but it's all of us together. We're engaged and we're trying to find purpose in commons as well as personally. So he does a great job of moving that through. They're not the same developmental theorist as Erik Erikson was or as Carl Jung is, but they're suggesting again a metaphor for us investigating. And what I'm proposing is gerotranscendence can also be a metaphor for all that we can become. And it has a lot more science behind it than some of the literature orientation. So the two books that I'll be primarily using in this 3-week course, which is in the fall semester, is this Life Cycle Completed, which was Erik Erikson's final book, completely re-edited and put together by his wife, Joan Erickson, who spent a lot of time working with him. And then we'll also be studying some of the detailed work and interviews and what people said as they were interviewed by this Swedish gerontologist named Lars Tornstam. Lars did a lot of the originating work on this concept of gerotranscendence, and it's a rich and inviting sort of thing. I love listening to the quotes that people offered him as he did his interviews and compiled his interviews at the university in Sweden. Is a marvelous sort of thing. So I invite anybody that's interested to come and join me in this investigation of what the possibility is about how we move, not only to become wise, but what's next? Where can we be headed? How does this benefit us as individuals and us as a people? Because we're all in this together. They sort of said that the thing of it takes a whole village to do this. Well, now it takes a village of elders and youngers. And so now we need to think this all out about where we can be and what we want to be as a people together. Hopefully, among the many choices that you make, this might be one. I like to see this as a time, not only when we're introducing some new material, but we talk about how does that material impact us as individuals. In fact, the last class of this Gerotranscendence, I take the inventory that Lars uses when he interviews elders throughout Europe and Australia and the United States. I take those interviews and I'm going to ask that of us as participants. Where are we at this? It's not kind of, I'm not a gerontologist, so I'm not doing a scientific study, but I want you to become as intimately connected with the subject as you can. So these are the original questions that Lars asked, and it's for us to reflect on them as well in our own lives and where we're at. So the topic is gerotranscendence, but the topic is really us, how we're growing in our elder years toward wisdom, but even beyond wisdom. That kind of meta shift that I referred to at the very beginning of the slides. hopefully I'll see you in the fall when we do this, but there are so many amazing courses. I mean, it's hard to choose among all of the different things that are available for all of us to do that. It's been really fun having the opportunity to sample and going around and tasting the different subjects that OLLI offers, and I hope you enjoy those opportunities as well. Thank you very much. My name's Tom Rinkoski. Perhaps I will see you as we meet in various OLLI courses on and off. Thank you for your time.
Tom, thank you so much. And I so appreciate the way you've reframed this journey and looking at it with the potential and the possibilities. So thank you so much. I think we all need to reflect on some of the themes you brought up. Now let me turn it over to Jenzy, our third lecturer. Thank you so much, Jenzy.
Hi, Kate. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. Okay, everybody, I am going to keep my topic a mystery for just a second until I share my screen. And there we go. And so the course that I just taught for OLLI in the summer, and spoiler alert, I won't be teaching it in the fall for OLLI because I will be teaching this plus another class in my day job with the Center for Spirituality and Healing, the Earl Bakken Center for Spirituality and Healing on our university's campus, where I'm an instructor. But the course that I am planning to propose to teach for OLLI next winter again is the Creative Arts in Healing, a sampler. I taught a very short version of this in June, and people really, really resonated with it. People really enjoyed it, which I love. This is material I love teaching, so I am going to hopefully be teaching an extended version of it next winter for OLLI. So,
Jenzy, can I interrupt briefly? Are you able to
yeah,
use the slideshow? Or
I I am. The only thing is with the slideshow function is it tends to get stuck sometimes.
okay.
And it tends to freeze up my basically the whole Google Slides application, so that I kind of have to stop sharing and restart everything, and it can get real annoying for people watching. So
Okay.
um
We can leave it this way too. And I just made my screen bigger. So anyone out there, if you're having a hard time reading, just, you can extend your screen a little bit and maybe that'll be helpful.
yeah, hopefully so, because I do want everybody to be able to see. So, yeah, the creative arts can be healing. And I'm guessing that at least some of you watching probably have had healing or otherwise just very beneficial experiences with the creative arts as part of healthcare. So the way I did it this summer was the first session was a kind of broad overview of the creative arts and healing. And I am just going to be presenting a few highlights from the slides that I used in class over the summer to give you all a taste, an appetizer, if you like, of the class. So I always invite people to think about, what have your experiences been with the creative arts and healing? And that's something that I'll invite you to be thinking about over these next 15, 20 minutes while I'm speaking, what experiences you've had with engagement of any of the creative arts in the context of healthcare or healing. So just be thinking about, which creative arts field was it? Was it music, visual art, maybe dance or movement? Was it poetry or spoken word or rap or reading or writing? Possibly. Was it something else creative? What was the setting? Was it a hospital or clinic or out in the community? And were you a consumer? Was it a receptive kind of experience with the arts, or were you creating? Was it both? You can feel free to share your responses in the chat if you want to. If not, that's fine. Just something to be reflecting about. And again, if that's something where you kind of feel like, yeah, I have had experiences with the arts and healing, and I really want to know more. Again, I hope I will be teaching about this for OLLI next winter, and we'll get to explore that together in more depth. So I won't be showing these videos because we do have a limited amount of time together, but I do share the videos in class. This one is from the Shands Center for Arts and Health at the University of Florida Medical Center. And they've been in the vanguard all along of the arts in healthcare. So they have a great 4 or 5 minute video on what is arts and health. But I will just go over this. What is arts and health? If this is brand new to you, if you're curious, this is the definition from that Center for Arts and Medicine at the University of Florida. It's multidisciplinary, as you might guess. It's very diverse, and it's all about transformative experiences using the arts in healthcare to help promote healing and well-being. NOAA, that I reference here, is the National Organization for Arts and Healthcare, and they are absolutely wonderful. They know that the field brings in the literary arts, performing arts, which would be music, dance, movement, theater, visual arts and design, and other forms of creative expression into not only hospitals and clinics, but also community settings to enhance our health and well-being. Arts and health as an academic discipline, so involving research and teaching, came out of a field that developed across the last 30 years of the last century. That makes it seem like a long time ago, but basically the point is arts and health is a relatively young field. And the thing is, though, using the arts to enhance healing and well-being is centuries and centuries old. So that's what's meant by the deep and enduring connections between the arts and health. So applications, again, might include hospital and clinic-based programs, and also lots of programs, just myriads of programs out in the community to promote health, wellness, and communication about health. You may even be familiar with some community programs where the arts are used to communicate public service messages about what is good for us and what's going to help us live longer and better. It can be easy to mix up the creative arts and health with creative arts therapies, but they're very distinct. The creative arts therapies, so by that I mean music therapy, art therapy, dance and movement therapy, drama therapy, poetry therapy, literary therapy. Those professions are a little older. Those came of age starting in the early to mid 20th century in the US and other countries. And creative arts therapists require more formal education, training, and credentialing than artists who work in healing, but might not necessarily have gone through creative arts therapy training. And this is a distinction we get into a little bit more in the class itself. So, but just to highlight the distinction, there are a lot of creative artists who work in healthcare settings, in hospitals and clinics and the communities who are not creative arts therapists. They just work in the creative arts and healing. So, training, certification, scope of practice is a little different. Ultimately, though, the very general goal is the same: to help people feel better and live better, live their best lives, basically, using the arts as a vehicle So we all know, I think the arts alone can't cure anything, but any professional in the field, whether they're a creative arts therapist or a creative artist in healing, would never claim that art alone can heal any actual illness or be a substitute for medical treatment. But arts and health professionals know how to facilitate creative experiences and keep participants safe. Also, arts and health professionals often work together with healthcare professionals as part of the team. So they'll work alongside doctors and nurses and creative arts therapists and allied health professionals like physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech language pathologists. In fact, I have gotten multiple graduate students in occupational therapy and speech and language pathology taking my creative arts and healing class in the Center for Spirituality and Healing because there are so many applications of the creative arts in those fields. And that's something they want to know more about, and also how to, how to incorporate that in their work. So, the whole field of arts and healthcare is part of what is called neuroarts, how the arts affect the nervous system, because the whole way that creative arts can enhance our well-being and enhance healing comes from the way they affect the brain. And Susan Magsamen she is really at the forefront of studying how the arts affects the brain. She directs the Mind Plus Arts Lab at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. She and Ivy Ross have co-written the wonderful book, Your Brain on Art, which came out 2 years ago. I know some people who were in my class in the summer, earlier this summer, have already read it, recommend it very highly. And I would like to take us briefly to this site, What is NeuroArts? And more research, a growing body of research is confirming what people have known across cultures, across history. We are wired for art, and this is why the arts are so good for us. Some cool graphics there. And because over the last 35-ish years, the technology for scanning the brain of people while they're engaging with the arts using functional MRI, fMRI, this allows researchers to look into the brains of people while they're engaging in arts and seeing how engaging with the arts actually can help our brains rewire in healthy ways. Our brains are already very plastic. They can easily be trained to grow new connections, even generate new nerve cells throughout life. And the arts really help promote that. So interacting with the arts, whether you are just consuming them receptively or making art yourself actively, it's so great for the brain and nervous system. And this is a lot of the mechanism behind why the arts are healing. So neuroarts is cross-disciplinary, transdisciplinary, and it's all about how aesthetic experiences engaging with the arts measurably and significantly change our brains and our minds, our bodies, and how we act. And check this out. Making art can reduce the stress hormone cortisol within 30 to 45 minutes. And everybody, that includes even something like, adult coloring books, sitting and coloring some kind of complex and pleasing pattern like a mandala for half an hour or 45 minutes can reduce the stress hormone levels in your body. Museum visits are being prescribed to decrease loneliness and increase cognitive skills. There are museums, in fact, that have special tours for people with memory loss and their caregivers that are very wonderful. One or more art experience a month can help you live longer and better. Sound practitioners using vibration and frequency to help people be more creative. This might not be too much of a surprise. Smell informs as much as 75% of your emotions. Tuning forks and the keys of C and G can create healing sound waves. Ever notice that when you sing or even hum, it's relaxing and centering? That's because it activates your vagus nerve, which is the kind of main nerve hub in your parasympathetic nervous system, the system that helps us rest and digest. Interactive exhibitions, playing music is great for our cognitive health throughout the lifespan, all the way from early childhood through the end of life. Music helps our brain grow. Arts support kids' emotional resilience. Performing arts increase perspective taking, understanding how other people feel and experience the world, which not only helps our brains work, it makes us kinder, nicer people, more empathic. So just a few of the findings there from research. The arts literally make us healthier, happier, and smarter. That's what I'm talking about. That's what the class is about. How do creative arts and healing in hospitals and clinics help people? Very much. They make a huge, profound difference, no matter what the art form. And it's also good for the hospital, the care system as well, because patients need less time in the hospital, less pain medication, less medication to help them relax and sleep. So arts, helping patients engage with the arts can actually save hospitals and clinics money and also help patients feel better about their stay. And it's also great for staff. Engagement with the arts can improve medical providers' recruitment and retention rates. So everybody wins. Research tells us specifically that, again, integrating creative arts in healthcare interventions can reduce how long people stay in the hospital, decrease their need for multiple visits to doctors. They need less medicine because they have less pain and anxiety. They feel better about themselves and how well they can cope. Less infection even happens. And again, less medical interventions. And this was research done over 10 years ago. There's only been more confirming this. So it's pretty amazing. In class, we look at some of these examples of creative arts in action. And in community settings, there's tremendous potential to help people with the arts and healthcare in community settings. So basically, it's similar to, as you might imagine, how engaging with the arts helps people do better with hospital stays and clinic visits. But in community settings, also engaging with arts and meaningful cultural experiences helps people feel more of a sense of self-efficacy and agency, like they are the ones in charge of their well-being. Connecting with their culture, aesthetic experience, just engaging with what we find aesthetically pleasing is healing. I mentioned emotional empathy and engagement. That also is increased by engaging with the arts, feeling heard and seen and valued, making meaning, transcendent experiences, and all of this just creates a better and more inclusive experience for people in the community as well. People feel safer, people feel more like part of the community, loneliness is decreased. Health communication can be improved by engagement with the arts. In class, we look at community arts and healing programs in action. And my task, and if you can call it that, it's actually too much fun for me to really think of it as a task, but it's kind of a job. It's a challenge to limit the examples that I share to just a few, because there are so many wonderful community arts and healing programs. So that is session 1 of the Creative Arts and Healing class. In the second one, and this is the one that I really will be proposing to expand on for the next time I teach this. In the summer sampler class, this was a whirlwind tour of poetry and hip hop and spoken word in healing, music in healing, dance and movement in healing, and visual arts in healing, all compressed into 90 minutes. I am going to propose to give each of those arts and healing fields their own 90-minute sessions. So this will be more like a 4 or 5 week class in the extended version. So just quickly, the research in each of these 4 creative arts and healing fields tells us some pretty impressive things. What engaging with poetry can do. It's good for the brain. It's good for pain and stress management. Again, a lot of these same benefits that I just reviewed with you in the introductory session a minute or so ago. Also, did you know rhythm and rhyme enhance and intensify all emotional responses, making it easier to connect with and express feelings? And I just want to say about that, this is one key way that all of the arts in healthcare, arts and healing fields work. Is ever notice how a lot of times when you have big, intense feelings, anywhere on the spectrum, from, really dark feelings, anxiety, depression, grief, profound anger, all the way to sheer joy, transcendence, it can basically, ever notice that the more intense a feeling is, the harder it is to put into words? The arts in healthcare, all of them can help people to do that, to express feelings that are hard to just talk about. Also, because our brains like rhyme and rhythm, as we see in poetry and also singing, this can make learning and memorizing fun and much easier. Ever notice how when you're trying to learn something, putting it into poetic form or setting it to music, or if you already know a song that teaches you some kind of material that's long or complex, even something like the ABC song, notice how that makes it so much easier to learn something? That's definitely a thing. Our brains like that. Our brains like rhyme. They like rhythm. When it comes to singing, our brains are wired for music. That makes learning and remembering easier. Poetry can also help people with dementia, reactivate memories and connections. And there are some wonderful programs for people specifically with memory loss that use poetry. Culturally relevant poetry, such as hip hop or rap, people, especially people of color, Black and brown people who see hip hop as an essential piece of their cultural identity, it can be especially healing for them to use that, because especially if they happen to be working with a therapist, and hip hop therapy is an actual field. And the therapist might not share the client's actual lived experiences, but if the therapist uses hip hop or rap and the client finds that relatable, that can help build trust. It can build pride in a person's cultural identity. This researcher here, Dr. Edgar Tyson, is the founder of hip hop therapy. He did a lot of seminal research about how valuable that is. In class, we look at these examples, including from a couple of local artists and poets about what poetry and healing look like. Oh, did I mention in the class, I will also be giving people the opportunity to create your own poem if you want. Music, moving on to music and healing, what the research tells us, music affects our entire brain within a fraction of a second, like few other experiences do. And I have some fun graphics and videos that show what that looked like. Music has profound effects on our whole well-being. These are the mechanisms that it uses acting on the brain and nervous system. And the benefits are, again, for our entire well-being, cognitively, psychosocially. It helps us coordinate and move our bodies better. Behaviorally, it helps us. And community music making, any of you in community singing groups or orchestras or bands at any point in your life, you know, when people come together in community to play music, especially if it's not competitive, if it's inclusive, you get all the benefits magnified as you make music together with other people. Even for critically ill people, music works. We go into this a little bit in class, examples of what that looks like. And again, I give you the opportunity to do some music and healing exercises for yourself. Dance and movement in healing. Dance and movement not only bring the same kinds of benefits as the other arts in healthcare, arts and healing fields and activities, better cognitive ability, better memory, more ability to express difficult to express feelings. You might not be able to talk about something with words, but you might be able to show with your body how you're feeling. That is very powerful. And also because this is a form of exercise, it's good for you to move. Some great videos and visual arts and healing, making visual art. Again, less cognitive decline, better brain function, less anxiety and depression. It's rewarding, it's fun. It can help us be more hopeful. And again, people who are having difficulty talking about hard experiences can often make art to express what they can't easily say. Also, many of us, me included, think they're not very good at visual art. Doesn't matter. Art in healing is for everybody of every level. So because making art is enjoyable and good for you, we should all do more of it. Even if we think we're not good at it, we're better than we think we are. Culturally specific art making, again, can help people feel connected to their heritage and identity, racial group, feel proud of that. And examples of what arts in healing looks like visually. And I am only slightly over time here with finishing up, but that is the whirlwind tour of the creative arts and healing. And again, this is just such fun stuff to research and to share with other people and to hear other people's experiences. So again, this is something that I'm hoping and planning to teach for OLLI again next winter in slightly expanded form. And if people enjoy it then, it'll probably become at least a semi-regular fixture. So thank you all for bearing with me, and hope to see you. As Tom before me was saying, there are so many great OLLI courses and experiences to engage with, though, that this organization's absolutely wonderful. You're just bound to have a good experience. So thank you.
Jenzi, thank you so much. And as you were talking, I was also thinking about some of the classes we have coming up. As you know, we do tend to have quite a few arts classes, arts literature. In this fall, we have a songwriting class. We have European folk music, poetry in motion, photography, Joe's class on Beach Boys. So lots of opportunities to get involved and learn more about music and art and culture and all of those things that really help with our brain. So thank you so much, Jenzi. Bree, I'd like to just see if there's any questions that we would like to answer before we close up today. I know you've been monitoring the chat as well as the Q&A.
Yes, thanks, Kate. I think we are up to date on questions, and I think I just wanted to kind of emphasize one of the questions I answered, which is about our request period, which opens on Monday at 9 a.m. And just a reminder that there's no need to, be the first to request a class. It's not like a first come, first served kind of model. Instead, we have a 2-week request period after which we run allocation to try to get as many folks into their, top selected classes as they wish. So we have a 2-week period, no need to, crash the system Monday morning, but we do hope to see you registering for classes during that time.
And we do have 95 classes this fall, so there's a lot of options. And some of them are single session, some of them they can go up to 7 weeks long. So lots of different options. Yes, and as Bree said, you can request as many courses as you can fit into your schedule. And then during the request period, everyone submits their requests, and then we treat everybody the same. We use a system that tries to maximize first choices across people. So, most of our members, I want to say our members on average, we watch this number, but get into 90% of what they request. So pretty high rate. Any other questions? I guess probably not, Bree. It sounds like you've been answering them as we've been going. So let me just wrap up then. I know we just have a couple of minutes, and I really just want to say thank you so much to our speakers today. Thank you to Nancy and Joe for helping paint a picture of what OLLI is about, and Kara, Tom, and Jenzi for helping us look at what a class might feel like and just get that practical experience of the kind of materials that we have. Thank you, Grayson Simmons and Bree Smith, who have been working behind the scenes, answering questions and dealing with the technology and making sure that we run smoothly. I just want to reiterate that OLLI is a membership organization. We are part of the University of Minnesota. You join for a year. The membership is $325, and that opens the door to everything we do, all of our courses, our special interest groups, our communications. And so it is a really good deal. Our average number of courses people take is 4 a term, and we have 4 terms. So, 16 classes for that amount of money is a pretty good deal. We are also offering, we know that some people may not know if they're going to like it. So we're offering just, if you're a brand new member, you can join just for the fall for $79. And all of this is on our website. It's olli.umn.edu. And so check it out. And I also do want to say we do offer scholarships. So if they're at $325 is daunting for you, please check out our website again. We have information about our scholarships. And as I mentioned, we have 4 terms a year. Fall is our busiest. Most of us really enjoy the coming back to school experience. And our course request period is our course term is October 6th through November 21st, and our course request period is August 18th through the 1st of September. And you will have best selection of courses then, but if you don't make that window, you can always come and enroll in things that are still open. With 95 classes, we have a lot of availability of seats. So thank you so much for coming today. Again, our website is olli.umn.edu. Thank you so much. We hope to see you this fall. Bye.